Hello everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. I'm excited to introduce you to a fascinating topic, notes on the most controversial idea in biology from Veritasium. In this session, we'll explore the gene-level view of natural selection, a perspective that has sparked a lot of discussion in the scientific community. We'll cover what makes this idea so controversial and why it matters for our understanding of evolution. Let's get started. This slide doesn't contain enough information. That's why we're moving to the next slide. So this slide emphasizes an important shift in how we understand natural selection. It's not just about individuals or even groups. It's fundamentally about genes, which are the core replicators. Genes are the units that get passed on and shape evolution over time. For example, think about why poop smells bad. It's because humans who found the smell attractive might have been more likely to get sick, and therefore, less likely to pass on those preferences. Natural selection has filtered out behaviors or traits that aren't advantageous, like liking something that could be harmful. This idea also challenges the common notion of survival of the fittest at the individual level. There are many examples of organisms displaying altruism, helping others, even when it might harm their own chances of survival. This suggests that individual-level selection isn't enough to explain these behaviors fully. And what about groups? You might think groups are the units of evolution, but they aren't, because they don't replicate in a way that natural selection can act directly on them. Instead, the real engine of evolution is at the genetic level, which helps us better understand the complexity of biological behavior and cooperation. All of these ideas tie back to the overarching theme. Understanding evolution requires us to look beyond just individuals or groups and focus on the genes as the fundamental drivers. So, in the early days of Earth, it all started as a chemical environment where random processes led to the creation of molecules that could copy themselves. These first self-replicating molecules are what we call the first replicators. Now, replication wasn't perfect. Mistakes or mutations occurred, which created different variants of these replicators. Because resources were limited, these variants had to compete with each other. The ones that had higher replication rates, lower chances of dying, and fewer harmful mutations tended to dominate. Over billions of years, these simple replicators evolved into more complex structures, what we now call survival machines, or organisms. Essentially, these bodies exist primarily to help genes survive and propagate, serving as vehicles for genetic information. This evolution from molecules to complex organisms is a fundamental part of understanding how life developed on Earth. So, the core idea here is that evolution primarily favors traits that help genes get replicated, rather than traits that necessarily make the organism happier or healthier. Think of an organism as a temporary carrier or vehicle for genes. The real winners in evolution are the genes themselves, because they persist across generations. This means that if a trait increases the chances that a gene is copied, say, by helping the organism reproduce more effectively, even if that trait shortens the organism's lifespan or puts it at some risk, it can still spread through the population. Ultimately, natural selection is evaluating the gene's long-term survival, not just the short-term well-being of the individual organism. Now, one piece of evidence supporting this gene-centered view is kin selection. This helps explain altruistic behaviors toward relatives. When you help your family members, you're actually increasing the chances that your own genes survive. Because relatives share many of your genes, helping them can be beneficial from a genetic perspective. This is where Hamilton's rule comes into play. It states that an altruistic act will spread if the benefit to the recipient, multiplied by how related they are to you, exceeds the cost to yourself. In formula terms, it's RBC. If helping a sibling or a cousin costs you little but significantly benefits their survival, that behavior makes sense genetically. This helps us understand why organisms often sacrifice for their kin, like siblings, offspring, or cousins, because, on a genetic level, their survival is connected to your own. What might seem like self-sacrifice is actually a strategic way to ensure the continuation of shared genes. In essence, What looks like altruism on the surface is actually a predictable strategy driven by genes. The selfish gene perspective frames these behaviors not as selfless acts, but as adaptive strategies to maximize gene replication over generations. Let's start with genetic drift. Not every change in evolution comes from natural selection. Sometimes, changes happen just by chance, especially in small populations. Genes can spread or disappear simply due to luck. It's not always about being better suited to the environment. This challenges the common idea that every trait exists because it was selected for. Next, the term selfish genes. Remember, genes don't have motives or intentions. When we say selfish, it's really a metaphor. It refers to the idea that genes which increase their own chances of being replicated tend to become more common over time. But critics warn us not to take this too literally. Genes aren't conscious agents. It's more about the statistical outcome of their behavior. Finally, on complex gene, trait mapping. Traits rarely come from just one gene for a specific thing. Instead, most traits result from networks of genes that interact with each other and with the environment. The simple idea that one gene causes one behavior doesn't capture this complexity at all. It's important to remember that the gene-centric view has its limitations, especially when trying to understand the full picture of how traits develop. Even with its limitations, gene-level thinking offers a really clear and straightforward way to understand evolution. It helps us see why certain behaviors, strategies, and biological features tend to stick around over time. It also allows us to predict patterns in altruism, cooperation, competition, and reproduction, which are all key aspects of evolutionary biology. Most importantly, this approach anchors our understanding at the gene level, which is the only level that truly copies itself across generations. Think of it as a lens that simplifies the often messy and complex biological world into a coherent logic, one based on replication and variation. And why is the gene-centric view still so powerful? Because it provides a unifying framework that connects many different biological phenomena, helping us make sense of the diversity of life through the lens of genetic survival and transmission. It's a fundamental perspective that continues to shape how we think about evolution today.